He humiliated her in front of everyone. He called her a useless old woman. He yelled that her hands shouldn't touch anything in that luxury jewelry store. The customers laughed. The employees looked down. And Maria, in her grey cleaning uniform, swallowed her tears in silence. But there was something that arrogant manager didn't know. She was the owner, the founder, the woman who built that empire with her own hands 30 years ago. And the time had come for the truth to come out. Like this, if it touched your soul, it's more than a click. It's a silent hug. Comment on how you think this story will end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing. But to us, it means a lot. Thank you for being here. The golden lights of royal crystal jewelry reflected against the Spanish glass display cases, like fragments of sun caught in time. In the heart of New York City, on the elegant Fifth Avenue, that temple of luxury breathed opulence in every corner. The diamonds sparkled under strategically designed lights. The emeralds rested on black velvet, and the air smelled of French perfume mixed with the woody scent of antique furniture. Moving almost invisibly within that world of shine and prestige was a 52-year-old woman. Mary Harrison wore a faded grey uniform, 2 sizes too big. Her greying hair was pulled back into a tight bun that tugged at her temples, accentuating the wrinkles that time and work had carved into her face. Her hands, hardened by years of effort, held a mop that she slid over the marble floor with precise, almost mechanical movements. No one looked at her. No one greeted her. To the impeccably suited employees and the designer bag-toting clients, Mary was part of the furniture, necessary but irrelevant. The irony was that this invisible woman had founded that empire with her own hands 30 years prior. 3 months ago, Mary had made a radical decision. After noticing sales dropping and customer complaints rising, she decided to infiltrate her own company. She hired a temporary manager to oversee things while she, under a false identity, worked as a cleaner. She wanted to see with her own eyes what had happened to the dream she built from nothing, and what she discovered broke her heart. The Friday afternoon had begun with the intense September sun pouring through the large windows. Mary was cleaning near the main display case when she heard firm footsteps approaching. She recognized the sound immediately. Richard Vance, the new general manager. Richard was a 40-year-old man, tall in an impeccable black suit and a red tie that screamed ambition. His hair was slicked back with pomade, and he constantly took off and cleaned his designer glasses, as if everything he saw deserved better light. He had arrived at Royal Crystal with brilliant credentials, an MBA from international schools, experience in luxury houses in Paris and Milan. On paper, he was perfect. But Mary had learned something in her years of experience. Paper lies when the heart is small. "Hey, you!" Richard's voice cut the air like a knife. Mary looked up. He was looking at her with a mix of impatience and disdain. "Yes, sir? Don't touch the main display cases with that dirty rag." He paused, looking her up and down. "In fact, better not touch anything. Your hands—" He stopped, letting the silence complete the offense. "Shouldn't be here." 2 young saleswomen arranging nearby necklaces exchanged glances and knowing smiles. One of them, Sophia, a 23-year-old with perfectly manicured nails, let out a choked giggle. Mary felt the heat rise in her neck, but she maintained her composure. She lowered her gaze and replied in a quiet voice, "Excuse me, sir. I will keep that in mind. Speak louder, please." Richard intentionally raised his voice. "We are not in the garment district here." Some clients examining engagement rings turned to look. Mary felt their stares like needles on her skin. She gripped the mop handle until her knuckles turned white. But she didn't say anything else. She just nodded and moved away toward the back of the store, where the glances didn't reach and the air was easier to breathe. While cleaning an ornate mirror, Mary saw her reflection, an older woman, hunched, almost defeated. For a moment she doubted her plan. Was this humiliation worth it? Did she really need to go through this? Then she remembered why she was there. She remembered the young Mary, the 23-year-old girl who came to New York from a town in Ohio with $50 and an impossible dream. She remembered the sleepless nights, learning the jewelry trade from an old master who saw something special in her. She remembered the day she opened her first store, small as a closet but full of dignity. Royal Crystal had been built on a sacred principle. True luxury is not in the price, but in respect. And that principle had died. Mary took a deep breath and discreetly wiped her eyes. No, she wouldn't. Give up. This company was her life, and she wouldn't allow men like Richard to turn it into something empty and cruel. She put the mop away in the cleaning closet and prepared for what was to come. Because Mary Harrison knew something Richard ignored. The most valuable diamonds are born under the most brutal pressure. The wall clock marked 4 in the afternoon, when the automatic jewelry store door opened with a soft electronic whisper. An older woman entered with unsure steps, leaning slightly, on a polished wooden cane. She wore a dark grey coat that was once elegant, but now showed the wear of time, and a silk scarf around her neck that had lost its original sheen. It was Dr. Elaine Fields, widow of the renowned cardiovascular surgeon, Dr. Albert Fields. Mary recognized her immediately, although she doubted Elaine would remember her. Years ago, Mary herself had sold her the white gold and diamond wedding ring that now shone dully on her finger. Elaine approached the main counter with the vulnerability of someone entering a place where she knows she doesn't quite fit in. Her face, marked by the elegance of another era, showed signs of tiredness. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup could not hide. Richard, who was checking inventory on his tablet, looked up with obvious annoyance. He did not get up from his seat. "How can I help you?" he asked with a tone that clearly said, "This is an interruption." Elaine cleared her throat, nervous. "Good afternoon. I need you to evaluate a piece." From her antique leather purse, she nervously pulled out a necklace. Even from a distance, Mary could see the particular reflection of the central stone, a diamond set in platinum with a design that was painfully familiar to her. Elaine placed the necklace on the counter, as if depositing a piece of her soul. "My husband gave it to me before," her voice broke, "before he passed away. Tomorrow there is a charity event in his memory. I want to donate it for the auction, but I need to know its real value. I cannot afford a mistake that would dishonor his memory." Richard took the necklace with one hand, without delicacy, like someone picking up a forgotten object in the street. He superficially examined it, turning it under the light with obvious disinterest. He took out a pocket loop, looked for barely 5 seconds, and let out a theatrical sigh. "Ma'am," he said with a smile that was meant to be professional, but only conveyed condescension, "I regret to inform you that this stone is zirconia. A quite decent imitation, yes, but an imitation nonetheless. Its value," he paused calculatingly, "maybe $800, $1,000 at most." Elaine's face turned the color of wax. Her hand sought the edge of the counter to steady herself. "What did you say?" "Zirconia." Richard repeated the word slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Look, ma'am, I understand it has sentimental value, but in commercial terms, my husband—" Elaine could barely breathe. "He would never— he told me it was— men sometimes," Richard shrugged with casual cruelty, "exaggerate a bit to impress, you know. Don't take it personally." Tears began to roll down Elaine's cheeks. They weren't silent tears, but sobs that shook her fragile body. Sophia, the young saleswoman, looked away uncomfortably. Another employee pretended to be busy with documents. No one did anything. Mary, who was mopping the floor 10 feet away, felt something break inside her chest. She knew that necklace. She remembered it perfectly. Serial number 3247. She had designed it herself in 1998, using a Type 2A diamond of extraordinary purity obtained through a contact in Antwerp. Dr. Fields had commissioned the piece for their 20th wedding anniversary, insisting that nothing less than perfection would be sufficient for his wife. And now that sacred memory was being profaned by the arrogant ignorance of a man who couldn't tell the difference between a diamond and a river stone. Mary left the mop leaning against the wall. Her legs moved on their own, guided by something deeper than reason, indignation. She approached the counter with slow but determined steps. "Excuse me," she murmured. "May I see it?" Richard looked up as if he had just noticed the presence of an annoying fly. "Excuse me?" The word came out loaded with venom. "The stone. Can I see it, please?" The manager let out a short, dry laugh that echoed throughout the store. "A cleaner evaluating jewelry?" He intentionally raised his voice. "Listen closely. You don't have the money to buy even a plastic ring here. Don't touch it. Security, remove this woman from the service area." The guard, a burly man named Mike, took a step forward with an uncomfortable expression. Mary felt the world stop. The humiliation fell on her like an icy wave. Her cheeks burned. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. But then something unexpected happened. Elaine Fields, in a trembling but firm voice, turned to Richard. "Let her see it." "What?" "Let her see the necklace." Elaine looked at Mary with a mixture of curiosity and desperation. "She is the only person in this store who has looked me in the eye since I walked in." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Silence spread like a crack in the ice. Mary, with hands that now trembled more from emotion than fear, took the necklace. She held it under the natural light coming through the large window. Her fingers traced the settings with the familiarity of someone who recognizes their own creation. She turned the central stone, observed its refraction, felt its exact weight, and then she spoke. Not as a cleaner, but as the master jeweler she had always been. "This diamond is authentic," Mary said with a clear voice, each word measured like a diamond on a precision scale. "Type 2, one of the rarest that exists." Richard took a step toward her, his face flushed. "How dare you?" But Mary didn't look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the stone, reading it like someone reading a beloved book 1,000 times. "Look at the refraction under this light." She moved the necklace slightly. "The rainbow it produces is distinctive. Zirconias create a different, more scattered spectrum. This is pure carbon crystallized under extreme pressure." Sophia, the young saleswoman, approached, intrigued. Other employees stopped their tasks. "And look here." Mary pointed to the setting. "This type of claw setting is called a Spanish crown. It was popular in the 90s. And the cut," she turned the stone toward Elaine, "is a modified cushion with 58 facets. See how each one captures and returns the light differently." Elaine leaned in, observing. For the first time that horrible afternoon, a spark of hope shone in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Mary nodded. "Completely. This piece is worth approximately $200,000, maybe more at auction, considering its origin and unique design." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard looked like a pillar of salt, paralyzed between disbelief and fury. His mouth opened and closed without making a sound. "This is ridiculous," he finally managed to say. "And we're supposed to believe a what?" Mary's voice was soft, but contained something that made Richard step back. "An old woman. Someone who cleans floors." She walked calmly toward the administrative office. The employees instinctively moved aside, creating a path. In front of the door, Mary entered a code on the security panel, 1972, the year she was born, a code that only 3 people in the world knew: her accountant, and her lawyer. The door opened with a soft click. Richard paled. Mary went in and returned seconds later with a sealed envelope. The paper had the gold letterhead of royal crystal and the red wax seal that identified high-importance official documents. "The certificate of authenticity," she said, handing it to Elaine. "Your husband, Dr. Albert Fields, commissioned this piece on March 15, 1998, serial number 3247. He picked it up personally a month later." Elaine took the document with trembling hands. She read every line, every official seal, every signature. The tears fell again, but now they were different. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of resurrected love. "He didn't lie," she whispered. "Albert never lied to me." She hugged the necklace against her chest, as if embracing her husband's memory. Mary felt a lump in her throat. Then she turned to Richard. The man was white as paper, with drops of sweat forming on his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mary raised a hand. "Not yet. I am not finished." She walked back to the office and returned with a black leather folder. She placed it on the main counter and opened it. Inside were legal documents, notary acts, and on the first page, a 30-year-old photograph. A young woman with dark hair and bright eyes holding the keys to a small shop. Below, a signature: Mary Harrison, founder and owner of Royal Crystal. "My name is Mary Harrison," she said with a firm voice, "and I am the owner of this jewelry store." The silence that followed was like the eye of a hurricane. No one moved. No one breathed. Richard stared at the documents as if they were written in an alien language. His brain refused to process what he was seeing. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The woman he had humiliated, the cleaner he had treated like trash, was his boss? "No, it can't be," he stammered. "The owners hired me by phone. I never saw..." You never saw the owner because I was here working undercover. Mary closed the folder with a dry snap. I wanted to understand why my company was losing customers, why sales were falling, why the reputation I built for 30 years was crumbling. She pointed toward Elaine, who still held the necklace to her heart. And now I understand perfectly. Richard tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat like stones. The employees watched the scene, with a mixture of shock and fascination. Sophia had her hand over her mouth. Mike, the security guard, seemed to want to sink into the floor. Other employees exchanged looks of disbelief. Mary slowly walked around the counter, her steps echoing in the absolute silence. 3 months ago, I started working here as a cleaner. I saw how you treated the workers. I heard how you spoke to customers who weren't wearing designer clothes. I witnessed your contempt for anyone you considered inferior. Mrs. Harrison, I was just... Richard held out a hand. I was just trying to maintain the store's image. The standards of a luxury jewelry store require... Require what? Mary interrupted him. Cruelty? Arrogance? Ignorance disguised as expertise? She pointed to Elaine's necklace. You almost convinced this lady that her husband had deceived her. You almost destroyed one of her last happy memories, and all because you wouldn't take 30 seconds to make a correct appraisal. Richard looked down. Royal Crystal's standards, Mary continued, were never about excluding people. They were about including excellence, real knowledge, not empty titles, genuine respect, not fake servitude. Elaine, who had remained silent, took a step forward. Mrs. Harrison, may I say something? I bought my wedding ring here 40 years ago. Elaine spoke in a soft but clear voice. You yourself attended to me, although you probably don't remember. You were a young girl, full of dreams. Now I am an old widow, who almost lost faith in the love of her life. She looked at Richard with sadness, not anger. You didn't just misappraise a jewel, you misappraised a heart. The words fell on Richard like hammer blows. The man collapsed, not physically, but something inside him broke. His shoulders slumped, his face lost all pretense. Mary observed the scene and felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, but sadness, because she understood that Richard was a product of a system that valued appearance over substance, and that system had infected her own company. Richard Vance, she finally said, you are fired. The man nodded slowly, defeated. You will pick up your things tomorrow. Today, go home and think about what kind of person you want to be. Richard walked toward the exit with automated steps. Before crossing the door, he stopped and looked back. I'm sorry, he mumbled, although no one knew for sure who the apology was addressed to. When the door closed behind him, Mary took a deep breath. The storm had passed, but the work of reconstruction was just beginning. The next morning dawned with a soft rain washing the streets of New York. Mary arrived at Royal Crystal at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before opening. She was not wearing the grey cleaning uniform, but an elegant yet discreet navy blue pantsuit. Her hair, now loose, fell in grey waves over her shoulders. She looked like a different person, although in reality she was simply herself. Employees began arriving shortly, after 8. Each one stopped when they saw her sitting behind the main desk in the office, the place where Richard had reigned just yesterday. Some greeted her nervously, others with shame. Sophia, the young saleswoman who had laughed at the humiliations, could barely look Mary in the eye. Good morning, everyone, Mary said when the last employee arrived. Please gather in the boardroom. 10 minutes later, the 14 store employees were seated around a mahogany table. There were salespeople, administrative assistants, the head of security, and 2 jewelers who worked in the second-floor workshop. Mary observed them one by one before speaking. I know yesterday was a shocking day. I know many of you feel confused, some ashamed. It's okay. We are all human. Sophia timidly raised her hand. Yes? Mrs. Harrison, Her voice trembled. I want to apologize. I laughed when Mr. Vance humiliated you. It was cruel of me. I have no excuse. I appreciate your honesty, Sophia, but I want you to understand something important. I am not looking for apologies. I am looking for change. She stood up and walked toward a whiteboard on the wall. Royal Crystal was founded on 3 principles. She wrote as she spoke. First, real knowledge. Second, universal respect. Third, beauty with purpose. She turned back to them. At some point, we lost sight of these principles. We started to value our customers' appearance more than their dignity. We started hiring people with impressive titles but empty hearts. Lewis, one of the older jewelers, raised his hand. "Why did you decide to come undercover, ma'am? Why didn't you just fire Mr. Vance and be done with it?" Mary smiled sadly. "Because the problem wasn't just Richard, it was systemic. If I had arrived as the owner, everyone would have acted differently in front of me. I never would have seen the truth." She walked back to her seat. "During these 3 months, I lived what thousands of workers live every day. Invisibility, casual, contempt, the assumption that someone who cleans floors cannot have valuable knowledge." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And I also saw beautiful things. I saw Mike, our guard, helping an elderly woman up the stairs when no one else noticed. I saw Carla from the administrative area, staying late to correct an error on a customer's invoice, even though no one asked her to. I saw small acts of kindness that reminded me why I loved this company from the start." The employees visibly relaxed. Some smiled. "So what happens now?" asked Mike. "Now we rebuild, together." Mary opened a folder with documents. "Starting tomorrow, we will implement changes. First, all employees will receive basic gemology training. You cannot sell jewels if you don't understand them." She wrote on the board as she spoke. "Second, we will establish a code of conduct based on respect. Any employee who shows contempt for a customer or colleague will be warned. On the third offense, fired. Third, we will create an internal aid fund. I know some of you have financial difficulties. This company must take care of its people." Sophia raised her hand again. "And what about us, the ones who failed? Will you fire us?" Mary looked directly at her. "Sophia, we all deserve a second chance, but a second chance demands growth. Are you willing to grow?" The young woman nodded with tears in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I promise." "Then welcome to the new Royal Crystal." The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Mary listened to suggestions, addressed concerns, and answered questions. When it ended, the employees left with a mixture of relief and renewed energy. But Mary knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The next day, Mary went up the stairs to the 2nd floor, where the jewelry workshop was located. It was a space she hadn't visited in her cleaning disguise, as Richard had prohibited access to non-essential personnel. The workshop smelled of metal and polishing wax. There were 3 work tables, with magnifying lamps, precision tools hung on panels, and a small safe where unset stones were kept. Natural light came through a skylight, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Lewis and David, the 2 jewelers, looked up in surprise when she entered. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," greeted Louis, a 60-year-old man with steady hands and tired eyes. "Good morning. May I see what you're working on?" David, younger and more reserved, pointed to a series of rings in different stages of creation. "These are custom orders. Mr. Vance said they weren't profitable, that we should focus on catalogue pieces." Mary picked up one of the unfinished rings. It was a simple gold band with a small ruby. The settings were handmade, with a delicacy that revealed mastery. "This is beautiful," she murmured. "Who designed it?" "I did," David admitted shyly. "A client asked for something special for her sick mother. She wanted each side of the ring to have a symbol, a heart, a star, and a rose. They represent love, hope, and beauty." Mary felt something stirring in her chest. It was exactly the kind of work for which she had founded Royal Crystal. Jewelry with soul, not just price. "Why did Richard say it wasn't profitable?" Louis sighed. "He said the time invested didn't justify the price, that it was better to sell catalogue pieces with higher margins." "But catalogue pieces don't create loyal customers," Mary replied. "They create transactions. Custom orders create relationships." She sat down on one of the workbenches. "I want us to resume this. Not just custom orders, but also the restoration of antique pieces. Remember when we used to do that?" Louis's eyes lit up. "Ma'am, 3 years ago we stopped offering that service. Richard said it wasn't in line with our brand image." Mary shook her head. "Nothing defines our brand better than our ability to restore life to what others consider lost. Starting today, Royal Crystal will once again be a place where jewelry has stories, not just price." Tags. She spent the rest of the morning in the workshop rediscovering tools she hadn't used for years. Her hands remembered the movements, how to hold the torch, how to polish without wearing down, how to see the soul of a stone before cutting it. Louis watched her with admiration. "You know, ma'am, when I was hired 15 years ago, you interviewed me yourself. You asked me what I saw in a rough diamond. I told you I saw possibility. You smiled and said, "Then you see what I see." Mary smiled. "And I still see it, Louis, in every stone, in every person." That afternoon, she drafted an advertisement that would be published in newspapers and social media. Royal Crystal seeks passionate jewelers. Your age or where you studied doesn't matter. Only what you see when you look at an unpolished stone matters. A week later, a man walked into the store wearing construction clothes. His boots left small dust marks on the freshly cleaned floor. He was about 35, sun-tanned skin, and calloused hands that told stories of hard work. Sophia, who was attending the counter, saw him approach and automatically tensed her shoulders. The old Sophia would have made up an excuse not to serve him, but the new Sophia, the one who had promised to change, took a deep breath and smiled. "Good morning, how can I help you?" The man pulled a dirty handkerchief from his pocket and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small, very worn gold ring. "My grandmother died a month ago," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This was her wedding ring. She raised 8 children with it on. She never took it off, not even when her fingers swelled with arthritis." Sophia carefully took the ring, as if it were a sacred relic. "I am so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," the man swallowed. "I want to restore it, clean it, repair the wear. I don't have a lot of money, but I've saved up. My wife is pregnant and I want our daughter to wear something of her great-grandmother." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. A month ago, she would have judged this man by his appearance. Now she only saw love. "Let me consult with our workshop manager." "One moment, please." She quickly went up to the second floor, where Mary was reviewing designs with Louis. "Mrs. Harrison, there is a customer downstairs. He needs to restore his deceased grandmother's ring. I don't know if we can—" Mary went downstairs immediately. When she saw the man and heard his story, she knew exactly what to do. "What is your name?" "David Johnson." "David, my name is Mary, and it will be an honor to restore your grandmother's ring, no charge." David blinked, confused. "Your grandmother wore that ring for decades while raising her family. That has a value that no money can measure. Restoring it is our privilege, not a service." David's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just promise me you will take good care of your family, just as your grandmother took care of hers." David nodded, unable to speak. He shook Mary's hand firmly before leaving, discreetly wiping his eyes. When the door closed, Sophia approached Mary. "Thank you for showing me how to truly see." Mary put a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't teach you anything that wasn't already inside you. You just needed permission to let it out." 2 weeks after the incident with Richard, an article appeared in a popular luxury and lifestyle blog, "The Dark Side of Elite Jewelry Stores When Glamour Hides Cruelty." The article, written by a journalist who had witnessed Mary's humiliation, narrated the story without naming Royal Crystal directly, but with enough details for it to be identifiable. It spoke of arrogant managers, mistreated employees, and customers judged by their appearance. Social media exploded. Some defended the jewelry store, others condemned it. The hashtag #LuxuryRespect began to circulate. Mary read the article silently in her office. She felt not anger, but opportunity. She called a spontaneous press conference at the store itself. They set up a small platform in front of the main display cases. Journalists from local media, bloggers, and curious people arrived. Mary stood in front of them without prepared notes. "Good morning. I am Mary Harrison, founder of Royal Crystal. Stories have been circulating about this store and I want to address them directly." She paused, looking at the cameras. "The article you read is true. A manager whom I myself hired abused his position. He humiliated employees and customers, and I allowed it by not being present in the right way." A murmur ran through the audience. "But I want you to know something else. For 3 months, I worked in my own company as a cleaner. I lived the invisibility that thousands of workers experience daily. And I learned that true luxury is not in what we sell, but in how we treat people." She pointed toward the second-floor workshop. "Upstairs, we have jewelers who restore worn wedding rings without charge because they understand that some values are priceless. We have salespeople who are learning gemology to serve better. We have security guards who help the elderly without being asked." Her voice became firmer. "Royal Crystal made mistakes, but we are correcting them. And we are doing it publicly because transparency is the first step toward trust." A journalist raised her hand. "What would you say to the people who were mistreated in your store?" Mary did not hesitate. "That I am deeply sorry, and that our doors are open to make things right." The conference lasted 30 more minutes. Mary answered every question with brutal honesty. She did not hide the failures. She did not make excuses. When it ended, something unexpected happened. The attendees applauded. The next day, a new article circulated. The jeweler who dressed as a cleaner to save her company. The extraordinary story of Mary Harrison. Social media changed its tune. Messages of support outweighed the criticism. And something more important. Customers began to return. George Miller was the owner of Elite Diamonds, Royal Crystal's main competitor in New York. For years he had tried to buy Mary's company, offering millions that she always rejected. When he read about the scandal and the subsequent recovery of Royal Crystal, he felt a mixture of admiration and envy. He decided to visit her personally. He walked in one November afternoon, as the first Christmas lights began to decorate Fifth Avenue. He wore an impeccable Italian suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than the average employee's monthly salary. "Mary Harrison," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's been a while since we last saw each other." Mary, who was checking inventory, looked up. "George, what a surprise. I read about your undercover adventure. Fascinating public relations strategy." "It wasn't a strategy. It was necessity." George laughed. "Always so direct. That's why I like you." He sat down. "Uninvited. I come with a proposal." "Another purchase offer?" "No, a merger. Elite Diamonds and Royal Crystal together would be unstoppable. We could dominate the US market, expand to France, Italy." Mary shook her head before he finished. "I am not interested in dominating markets. I am interested in serving people." "That's very poetic, Mary. But business requires pragmatism. Your company had a public scandal. Your reputation is damaged. I offer you stability. My reputation is being rebuilt. With truth, not corporate makeup." George leaned forward. "And what will happen when the novelty wears off? When customers forget your heroic act and simply want to buy cheap jewelry online? Then we will remind them why it's worth buying in person. Because here we don't just sell jewels, we sell stories, experiences, and respect." George sighed and stood up. "You are stubborn, Mary. You always were. And you are calculating, George. You always were." She smiled without malice. "That's why each of us runs the business we deserve." When George left, Mike, the guard, approached Mary. "Do you think he will try again?" "Probably. But some people don't understand that success is not just measured in numbers. It is measured in lives touched." In December, Mary organized a small ceremony at the store. She invited all employees and some special customers, including Elaine Fields and David Johnson. In the center of the room, on a blue velvet pedestal, rested two pieces: Elaine's restored necklace and David's grandmother's ring, now shining like new. "These two jewels," Mary said, "represent everything Royal Crystal should be. They are not the most expensive we have handled, but they are the most valuable because they are filled with real love." Elaine approached and took her necklace. She held it against the light, seeing how the diamonds captured and returned every ray with mathematical perfection. "Thank you, Mary, not just for restoring the jewel, but for restoring my faith." David, with his pregnant wife by his side, took his grandmother's ring. "My daughter will be born in 2 months, and when she's old enough, I will tell her the story of her great-grandmother, of this ring, and of the woman who understood that some things are priceless." Mary felt tears running down her cheeks, but she didn't hide them. They were tears of joy, of purpose, fulfilled. After the ceremony, she stayed alone in the store. She walked among the display cases, touching the surfaces with affection. She remembered the 23-year-old girl who came to New York with nothing but a dream. She remembered the nights learning the trade, the failures, the small victories that built something big. And she thought about the month she spent as an invisible employee, feeling the humiliation, the invisibility, the casual contempt that so many endure daily. She did not regret it. Every moment had been worth it. In January, Mary received an unexpected call. It was from the president of the New York Chamber of Commerce. "Mrs. Harrison, we want to honor you at our annual gala. Your story has inspired many business owners to rethink how they treat their employees." Mary accepted. although she had never liked formal ceremonies. The night of the gala, she dressed with simple elegance, a black dress with a silver brooch she had designed herself 30 years ago. She wore her grey hair loose, untinted, unashamed of her age. When she stepped onto the stage to receive the award, she did not read a prepared speech. She spoke from the heart. This award is not mine. It belongs to every employee who treats others with dignity even when no one is watching. It belongs to every invisible worker who keeps the world running without receiving credit. It belongs to all those who understand that respect is not a luxury, but a fundamental right. The room erupted in applause. But the most significant moment came afterward, when a young woman timidly approached her. "Mrs. Harrison, I work as a waitress. People always treat me as if I were invisible. Your story gave me hope. It reminded me that my job has dignity, even if others don't see it." Mary hugged the young woman. "You are never invisible. The people who don't see you are the ones who have chosen blindness, but that is their loss, not your fault." In February, a new challenge arose. Carla, the administrative employee whom Mary had noticed for her integrity, asked to speak privately. "Mrs. Harrison, I have something to confess." Mary invited her to sit down. "During the time you worked as a cleaner, Carla looked down. "I knew who you were." Mary raised her eyebrows, surprised. "How?" "I recognized your walk, your hands. I've worked here 10 years. I've seen you touch the jewels with that particular affection. No one else does it that way." "And you didn't say anything?" "No, because I understood you were doing something important. But now I feel guilty for not having defended you when Richard humiliated you." Mary thought for a moment. "Carla, you had no obligation to reveal my identity, and staying quiet was not complicity. Sometimes wise silence is worth more than impulsive words. Aren't you mad?" "I am grateful. Your discretion allowed me to see the complete truth." She smiled. "But I have a question. Why didn't you look for a job where you got paid better? You have skills that many companies would value." Carla smiled sadly. "Because here, I learned something that money can't buy. Integrity. You taught it even when you weren't present. And I wanted to preserve it." Mary felt deep pride. "Carla, I want you to be the new general manager." The woman gasped. "Me? But I don't have an MBA. I haven't studied at prestigious universities." "You have something better. Character. And that is not taught in any school." In the following months, Royal Crystal not only regained its prestige, but amplified it. Sales increased by 30%, but more important than the numbers, the internal culture changed. Radically, the store's atmosphere transformed. Where before there were looks of distrust, now genuine smiles blossomed. Employees greeted every customer with the same warmth, regardless of whether they arrived by taxi or luxury car. Every new employee received Mary's complete story during their first week, how she founded the company with $50 and a dream, how she almost lost it by moving away from her values, and how she saved it by living on the other side. The story became part of the company's DNA. Carla, in her new role as general manager, implemented a policy they called the Invisible Day. Once a month, every manager had to work in a different position, from cleaning to security, to maintain perspective. The idea was born from a late-night conversation between her and Mary. "If you never walk in the other person's shoes," Carla had said, "you forget that we all walk on the same ground." One spring Tuesday, when the streets of New York smelled of orange blossoms, a young journalist named Laura Green arrived to do a special report. She brought a camera and a notebook full of carefully prepared questions. "Mrs. Harrison," she began after formal greetings, "your story has traveled the world. There are articles about you in newspapers in London, Tokyo, and Paris. How do you feel about having become a symbol?" Mary, sitting by the window where the afternoon light drew golden patterns on her desk, smiled with some discomfort. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to save my company and understand what had gone wrong. But you achieved it in an extraordinary way. If you could go back, would you repeat the entire process? The humiliations, the pain, the insults?" Mary was silent for a moment. She looked out the window at Fifth Avenue, where the life of New York flowed in its beautiful chaos. Tourists taking photos, hurried executives, mothers with strollers, elderly people walking slowly. Everyone sharing the same space, yet living different realities. "Every second," she finally replied, "every humiliation, every tear hidden in the bathroom, every night where I doubted if I could endure another day. Why? Because you can't fix what you don't understand, and you can't understand the pain of others if you don't live it on your own skin. She turned to the journalist. I thought I knew my company, but I knew it from one perspective. Mine. The one of power, of privilege, of someone who has never been invisible. Laura quickly scribbled. Totes, what would you say to other business owners reading this interview? Mary leaned forward, her eyes shining with intensity. That they should come down from their panoramic view offices, that they should talk to the person who cleans their floors at 5 in the morning, with the person who serves their coffee, with the person who guards their doors in the cold dawn. Those people see things you will never see from above. They know the company secrets that no financial report will reveal. And what if they are afraid of what they might discover? That fear is precisely the reason why they must do it. The interview continued for almost 2 hours. Laura asked about specific moments, about difficult decisions, about how Mary handled the temptation to reveal her identity when the humiliation became unbearable. There was a moment, Mary confessed, when Richard yelled at me in front of a group of customers. He called me a useless old woman. I felt something break inside me. I wanted to scream, I am your boss, you are fired. But I bit my tongue until it bled. What stopped you? The certainty that if I revealed my identity at that moment, it would have been because of wounded ego, not purpose fulfilled. And my purpose was to understand the truth, not to punish the offense. When the interview ended and Laura was packing her equipment, she stopped at the door. Mrs. Harrison, may I tell you something personal? Of course. My mother works as a housekeeper. For years I have seen how people treat her as if she were invisible, as if her cleaning hands were not the same hands that hugged me when I was a child. Laura's eyes welled up. Your story reminded me that my mother is a queen, that others simply do not know how to see. Mary stood up and hugged the young journalist. Your mother is exactly that, a queen, and every time someone doesn't see her, it's because they have chosen blindness. But that is their loss, not your mother's lack of worth. Days later, the report was published on the front page of the New York Times with the headline, The Jeweler Who Went Invisible to Save Her Empire. The article went viral. It was shared hundreds of thousands of times on social media. It inspired other business owners to do similar immersion exercises in their own companies. Some did it genuinely, transforming their companies. Others used it as a publicity stunt, lasting only days before abandoning the experiment. Mary did not judge. Everyone learned at their own pace, and in their own way. One May sunset, as she was closing the store, and the setting sun was painting the display cases in orange and purple hues, Sophia approached her with an excited expression. Mrs. Mary, I have to tell you something. What's happening? I was accepted into the Gemological Institute of America, GIA, the 2-year intensive program. Her eyes shone. I want to be as good as you someday. I want to be able to look at a stone and see its story, not just its price. Mary felt a wave of maternal pride. She took Sophia's hands in hers. You are already good, Sophia. You just need to believe it. Technical knowledge will come with time, but what truly matters, she touched the young woman's chest, is already here. Respect, humility, the ability to see beyond appearances. That is not taught in any institute. Can I ask you something personal? Always. Sophia hesitated for a moment before continuing. How did you survive those months of humiliation without breaking? There were days when Richard was so cruel. How did you keep your head up? Mary walked to the window, contemplating the lights of New York that were beginning to turn on one by one, like terrestrial stars. Because I knew who I was, even if others didn't. She turned to Sophia. True identity is not given by titles or external recognition. It is not built by the applause of others or the approval of your superiors. You build it yourself, in silence when no one is looking, in the decisions you make when you think no one is watching you. But it hurt, didn't it? I saw your eyes that day, Richard. It hurt like hell. Mary interrupted with honesty. I cried in the bathroom. Some nights I couldn't sleep, replaying the humiliations in my mind. But that pain had a purpose. It wasn't empty suffering. It was active learning. Sophia nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Thank you for showing me that true success is not climbing over others, but helping them climb with you. Mary hugged the young woman. feeling that everything, every insult, every hidden tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it if she could inspire people like Sophia to build a more dignified world. That night, before turning off the lights, Mary sat alone in the center of the store. She looked at the shining display cases, the jewels that captured and returned the light in 1,000 colors. But her greatest treasure was not in the display cases. It was in the people who walked through those aisles every day, treating each other with mutual respect, seeing the inner glow that everyone carried within, and that no amount of diamonds could buy. A year after the incident with Richard Vance, on a September afternoon, when the New York air had that cool touch that announces autumn, Mary organized a special gathering. It would not be at the store, but in a nearby event hall she had rented for the occasion. She sent invitations to everyone, current and former employees who had been unfairly fired during Richard's management and had now been rehired with formal apologies. She invited loyal customers who had stayed with the company during the difficult times. She called suppliers, local artisans, and even the old master jeweler who had taught her the trade 30 years ago. And in a gesture that surprised many, she also invited Richard Vance. When Richard entered the hall that afternoon, he looked like a completely different version of the arrogant man he had been. He wore a simple suit, nothing ostentatious. His hair was no longer slicked back with pomade. He walked with his shoulders slightly slumped, not out of defeat, but out of hard-earned humility. He approached Mary with unsure steps, like a student who doesn't know if he will be welcome in class. "Mrs. Harrison, when I received your invitation, I thought it was a mistake. I don't know if I should be here after everything I did." Mary offered him a warm smile. "I invited you because you deserve to see what we built from the ashes of our mistakes. We all deserve witnesses to our redemption." Richard swallowed, emotional. "I have worked this last year in a small family jewelry shop in Queens. It's a humble business, run by 3 generations. I earn a fraction of what I earned here." He paused. "But I have learned more about true jewels and about real people than in all my previous career with prestigious titles. I am deeply happy to hear that. The best learning always comes wrapped in humility. I want to apologize." Richard continued. "Not just to you, but to every person I hurt with my arrogance. I know words don't erase the damage, but I need to say them." Mary gently guided him toward the center of the hall, where all the guests were waiting. There were about 50 people, Royal Crystal employees, some with their families, Elaine Fields with her restored necklace on, David Johnson with his wife and their newborn baby, Carla and her team, Louis and David from the workshop, Sophia and other salespeople. "Richard has something to say," Mary announced, giving him the center of the space. The man stood in front of the audience, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed himself to be before. His hands trembled slightly. "Good afternoon, everyone. Many of you know me as the manager who made you feel small, who humiliated you, who confused power with leadership and arrogance with excellence." His voice cracked slightly. "I spent years believing that success meant being above others, looking down on them. I built my career on casual contempt and cruelty wrapped in professionalism." He looked directly at Mary. "Mrs. Harrison taught me, in the most painful way possible, that true success is not standing on top of others. It is standing beside them. It is lifting them up with you." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Thank you for firing me. It was the best gift anyone has ever given me, even though I experienced it as my worst nightmare at the time." The attendees were silent for a moment. Then, slowly they began to applaud, not with mockery or condescension, but with the profound recognition that everyone at some point in their lives needs to be stripped of their illusions to find their truth. Mike, the security guard, stood up. "I also want to say something." He cleared his throat nervously. "I worked here for 10 years feeling invisible. But Mrs. Mary saw me, and by seeing me she reminded me that my job has dignity, that caring for the safety of others is an honor, not a lesser job." Others began to stand up one by one, sharing their stories. Carla spoke of how she learned that integrity is worth more than any title. Sophia told how her perspective on luxury completely changed. Louis and David explained how they fell in love with their trade again when they were allowed to work with soul, not just with technique. Elaine Fields, leaning on her cane, asked to speak. "I came to this store at my worst moment, with a memory I thought was tainted by lies." She touched her necklace. "Mrs. Harrison didn't just restore a jewel. She restored my faith that kindness still exists in this fast-paced and often cruel world. When everyone finished, Mary finally took the floor. She stood in the center, looking at the faces of people who had become her true family. I have learned something fundamental in this extraordinary year. Diamonds are not special because of their price or rarity. They are special because of their process. She raised a hand, illustrating with gestures. They form deep within the earth, under extreme pressure in absolute darkness for millions of years, and when they finally emerge to the surface, they have a unique ability to reflect light in ways nothing else can. She walked slowly, making eye contact with each person. Every one of you is a diamond, not because of what you are worth monetarily, nor because of your titles or bank accounts. You are diamonds because of the pressure you have endured with dignity, because of the darkness you have crossed without losing your essence, and because of the light you now reflect to the world. She pointed toward Richard. Even you, Richard, especially you, because you had the courage to look at yourself in the mirror, see what you didn't like, and decide to change. That requires more bravery than maintaining a perfect facade. She raised a crystal glass that shone under the hall lights. I toast to royal crystal, not for what we sell, but for what we represent, for the principle that true luxury was never gold, nor diamonds, nor price tags with many zeros. True luxury is respect. It is dignity. It is seeing the glow in every person, even when the whole world has conspired to make them invisible. Everyone raised their glasses, and at that moment, under the hall lights and with the warm murmur of human conversations, everyone felt themselves shining from within. 3 months after that meeting, a new plaque was installed at the main entrance of Royal Crystal. Mary had designed it personally. It was not made of precious metal or inlaid with expensive stones. It was Spanish olive wood, hand-carved by a local artisan, with simple but profound letters. True luxury is respect. Here, every person shines. Mary, now 54 years old, walked through her renewed store every morning with the same wonder as the 23-year-old who opened her first closet-sized shop. Her hair was grayer, the wrinkles deeper, marking her face like maps of lived experience, but her eyes shone with the same intact passion, perhaps even more intense. Sometimes when the store was empty in those early morning hours, Mary would take a mop and clean the marble floor herself, not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember. She needed to stay connected to those 3 transformative months that taught her more about leadership, humanity, and purpose than 3 decades of business success. And when a new employee asked her with surprise why the owner of the jewelry store was cleaning floors, she would stop mopping, straighten up, and reply with a smile that contained oceans of wisdom. Because humility is not something you do once and check off your list. It is something you consciously choose every day, in every interaction, in every decision you make when no one is watching you. Royal Crystal prospered beyond all expectations, not just as a business, although sales reached historical levels, but as a symbol that another way of doing business was possible. Other companies in New York, Chicago, and beyond began to adopt her principles. The concept of invisible leadership was taught in business schools, always citing Mary as a case study. But she never lost sight of the essential, that every person who walked through those doors, regardless of whether they wore Armani or flea market clothes, regardless of whether they arrived in a Mercedes or a bus, deserved to be seen with prejudice-free eyes, listened to with genuine attention, and valued for the simple fact of being human. One winter afternoon, as the first Christmas lights began to decorate New York, Elaine Fields walked into the store. Now she walked with more firmness, as if recovering the truth about her necklace had also restored stability to her steps. "Mary," she said with a smile, "I was just visiting. Sometimes I need to be in places where I feel seen." The 2 women had tea in the office, talking about life, loss, and small daily victories. And when Elaine left, Mary was left thinking about something her childhood teacher had told her decades ago. True success is measured by how many hearts you touched, not how many bank accounts you filled. As night fell, Mary turned off the lights in the display cases one by one. The diamonds stopped shining, the emeralds darkened, the gold lost its luster. But something remained shining in that store, invisible to the eyes, but real as the air. Respect, dignity, the commitment to to see every human being as the diamond they truly are. And that glow Mary knew with every fiber of her being was the only one that truly mattered. Because in the end, when all the jewels are stored in safes and all the display cases are covered with cloths, the only thing that endures is how you made people feel. If you made them feel small, you will be forgotten. If you made them feel seen, you will be eternal. Mary Harrison had chosen eternity.